All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of the Buck the System Show. I'm David West. This is just going to be a short but pretty serious episode before I get back to some of the more regularly scheduled stuff I have been working on and getting ready for you guys. As I'm sure all of you know, Qasem Soleimani got assassinated by the U.S. government the other day. He was Iran's special forces, special operations, whatever you want to call it, general who had been in charge of a lot of stuff and had, funded and meddled in a lot of insurgent activity around the Middle East. Not a whole lot unlike what the U.S. government has been known to do. I don't really want to talk about that, though. It's just that in the face of, looming potential war with Iran, which could happen if things continue to escalate, I just want to talk a little bit about the human cost of war. So, as anyone who's followed my channel and my work for a long time probably knows, I was in the military. I joined the Army out of high school. I was at first, at least, very gung ho about it. I really wanted to serve my country and protect people, and fight a good, just fight. And eventually, after deploying to Iraq in 2009, I grew very disenchanted with the military. Started realizing, I just started feeling like we were the bad guys. Not to say that, most of the people fighting in the Middle East are good guys, but I just realized that what we were doing was wrong. And, oftentimes in war, there really is no good guys and bad guys. It's just a bunch of people somewhere in between fighting each other. I realized, as I'm sure you can tell, I have a lot of firearms. I probably have 15 plus thousand rounds of ammunition stacked up over here. I have dozens of guns. I'm the exact kind of person who, if America was ever invaded, would be an insurgent. I'd be the first person fighting out there on the streets. And I have a lot of friends who'd be fighting with me. And I just realized so often I felt like the people that we were going after in Iraq, it was like we had no real way of knowing, is this really an evil person, or is this a person who's just fighting people because they're in their country, like any of us would do. So eventually I got out as a conscientious objector. That was a very difficult thing to do, given that I wasn't a pacifist. It was a little tough convincing the military, yes, I am a sincere conscientious objector. I'm just not a pacifist. I would defend myself. I'd defend my family. I'd fight off invaders, but I'm never going to work for the government again. I'm never going to fight for the government again. And I am at this point a libertarian anarchist, and I just can't in good conscience do this. But eventually I was able to get out and go back to my life. Thankfully, when I was deployed, it was a very low-key deployment. We didn't even have like any shots fired or anything. I still saw a lot of stuff that bothered me, how we treated people that we detained, what we did when we were raiding targets. But thank God I didn't have to be involved in any like real combat or anything. I was lucky. I was a lot luckier than a lot of veterans are. And I just want to share with you guys some of the costs of war and military lifestyle that I have seen just in my own personal life and in the lives of my friends. So I planned on trying to get a couple more episodes out to you guys the last couple days. I'm going to tell you now why that didn't happen. I found out a few days ago that an old friendly acquaintance of mine, a guy that I've played airsoft with over the years, and he was good friends with some of my good friends. So I've known him for years, since like high school and stuff. Was gunned down by police here in Oregon, and also one of my best friends was with him when it happened. They had a pretty good day, and then I don't want to share too many details, but it looks like the guy who ended up getting shot by the police had some kind of, I don't know, PTSD breakdown or some kind of mental break. He pulled a gun on my other friend and didn't really seem to know what was going on. And the police ended up being called, and by the end, it looks maybe even just like a potential suicide by cop kind of situation. But he was a good guy who had some kind of trouble going on, and my very good friend who was there acted very heroically. Was just being a good friend, looking out for his buddy, trying to talk him down, trying to help him, and in the end, it just wasn't enough through no fault of his own. And so when I heard about that, I just heard that this guy had been killed by the cops, and I was shocked, and I start looking into it, and I realized, oh my gosh, one of my best friends was right there with him. And this guy was one of my best friends. He'd known this other guy since they were like 7. They'd been friends forever. And so I reached out to him, and I was like, hey man, if you need to get out of town, I know it's been a really rough couple days for you. Let me know. I'll get you out of town. We'll go do something. And he took me up on it. So we went out camping. We just went out, spent the night out at some really cool like hot springs out in the middle of nowhere that I know. We cooked some brats around a campfire, hung out in the hot springs, talked about life, caught up, had a good time. As good a time as you can in a situation like that, and I hope it was beneficial to him. But both of these guys were in the military. The guy who got killed, he was, I believe he was both a Air Force and Army veteran, and my friend was in the Marines, and my friend never actually even deployed, but even still, he's known a handful of people who've killed themselves, and now it kind of looks like we can pretty much add another person to that list. Basically, everyone I know who's been in the military has known soldiers or airmen, Marines, whatever, who have ended up taking their own life. And it's hard not to think that a lot of that has to do with the things that people do overseas. They see things that traumatize them. They do things that they end up feeling guilty about. And it's really hard not to think that that's a factor. But even just besides people killing themselves, so many people just get hurt and killed in these wars anyway. It all seems so futile, just in amongst like my friend and acquaintance group. While I was working on getting out of the military as a conscientious objector on that next deployment that was happening while I was about to get out, a guy that I had roomed with for probably 2 months or so while I was in Iraq, he was in my unit, got killed. And so did another guy with him who I'd worked with for a little while. And then just a couple weeks after that, a new officer who would have been in charge of me, but I was back getting out as a conscientious objector, got sent over there mid-deployment, and I'd gotten a chance to talk with him a few times around our company. I thought he seemed like a really nice guy. I think he had like an infant child. He got killed. If I remember right, he stepped on like a pressure plate and got both his legs blown off and then bled out in a helicopter getting medevaced. if I remember correctly, I think that's what happened. Really pissed me off, like seeing all these people dying for no reason. And at the same time, I can't be that mad at the people who were killing them, because without knowing a whole lot more information, I really don't know that they aren't just people like me. They aren't just people that are fighting because their country's occupied. I don't think very many of the insurgents in the Middle East are just cartoon villains. I mean, not every person who takes up arms and fights an invading military force is, the same kind of evil that would hijack planes and crash them into civilian buildings and kill 3,000 people. Like, you got to recognize there's a distinction between a terrorist who would attack non-combatants in a foreign country and an insurgent who would take up arms and fight an invading force. I would proudly be an insurgent who took up arms and fought an invading force in America. And I think probably most people who would listen to a guy like me talk in a room like this would also do that. Another guy that I knew, sure, maybe some of you've heard of him, David Crowley. He was a sort of libertarian filmmaker. He was working on a film called Gray State. I'd read the script. It seemed like it would be a pretty cool movie. It was kind of about a dystopian near future. It was the exact kind of thing that I would be interested in. Me and him became friends on Facebook because I was a libertarian filmmaker and he was doing similar stuff. We met up and hung out at Paul Fest, a big Ron Paul themed festival that happened at the same time as the Republican National Convention in 2012. Hung out there for a couple days. We talked about working together in the future. And then he kind of started going dark for a while. And then I found out, I think it was almost exactly 5 years ago now. I think it was like the first week of January 2015. The world found out that he had killed his wife and daughter and killed himself. And I don't know if that was something, if PTSD and what he'd done in the military had any effect on that. I don't, it looks like it was maybe some kind of weird suicide pact he and his wife had from all the information that's come out since then. It's a very bizarre situation. There are, of course, a lot of conspiracy theories about it. I don't think those are very founded in reality. But whatever the case was, it's hard not to think that his time in the military didn't have any impact on that situation and whatever mental illness took root and eventually caused him to do what he did. Another guy that I know, a good friend of my little brother's, my little brother, well, I have 3 little brothers, but one of them is 5 years younger than me. And so by the time he and his friends were graduating high school and his friend was going to be joining the military, I was out of the military for a couple years and back living in town. And so I had several pretty good conversations with this friend of his, trying to talk him out of joining the military, telling him about my experiences, telling him, hey, if you believe in freedom, if you believe in gun rights, all this stuff, maybe the military is not the place where you would want to be. Maybe you wouldn't want to go to these countries and invade them and end up, having to fight and kill people for no real reason who are just trying to defend their country. And, of course, he didn't listen. He joined the military, and about a year and a half ago, he got his leg blown off, along with some other injuries. I think he lost a couple fingers. I think he might have like a traumatic brain injury from the incident or something. Whatever the case, he got horribly injured. And, when I heard about that, I was sick to my stomach for a few days, just like wishing I could have talked him out of joining. At the same time, he did it of his own volition. He's lucky to be alive. And frankly, the people that blew him up probably wouldn't have been unjustified in killing him. He had a particularly bloodthirsty job and had done it dealt a lot of death and destruction to the people who ended up blowing him up. So, he it's kind of like, well, count your blessings. You're alive. And that's, to me, kind of looks like God both judging you and sparing you. Yeah, it's just the number of people I know who were in the military who, had to have lost people to suicide is staggering. I don't really have any great overarching point to make here, except that war is bad, and I think it has a very detrimental effect, not just when it comes to, the civilian casualties, not just when it comes to the cost in the countries that we attack and invade, costs that, frankly, unfortunately, a lot of people just don't seem to care about. It has very real negative physical and psychological effects on the people who you send to fight it. And, I firmly believe that unjustly killing people in war is murder, just like I believe abortion is murder. But not all murder needs to be handled the same. There's a reason we have first degree murder, premeditated murder versus second degree murder, kind of passion in the moment murder. And just because I think that soldiers are often involved in murder doesn't mean that I hate them, doesn't mean that I want to see anything bad happen to them. What I want ideally is for them not to go to war and not to murder and be involved in all this death and unjust bloodshed in the first place. And so I would just really urge you guys, I've seen a lot of libertarians, especially the ones who've been caught up in being all into Trump. I've seen even a lot of libertarians excited about, bombing Qasem Soleimani. And don't get me wrong, he seems like an awful person. Just like any politician, government official who meddles in the affairs of other countries and deals out death there is an awful person, if you catch my drift. He's awful, I'm sure. But we don't want to start a war. There's no reason for us to go to war with Iran. Have we not seen how unfruitful and how pointless these wars are over the last, 18 years? Going on 19 years we've been in Afghanistan, 17 or so that we've been in Iraq. We've got to realize at some point that these things are pointless. And the amount of saber rattling that I've seen coming from people. There was a couple local news articles about anti-war protests happening in towns like Ashland. And don't get me wrong, Ashland is full of a bunch of stupid liberals. I'm sure these people are giant hypocrites who weren't out there protesting war when Obama was drone striking people. But you know what? They're not wrong to protest this potential conflict. They're not wrong to say that we don't want war with Iran. And the level of vitriol and nastiness that I saw directed towards them in local news comments, which are just an awful cesspool to begin with, sickened me. I had people being like, oh, you should take Christian out of your bio when I was commenting on there and saying, oh, we shouldn't go to war, when I was saying, guys, this is moronic. Why would we start a war? And I was kind of defending these people. It was just sickening. It's always sickening to see how many Christians are more in step with the Republican Party's orthodoxy than they are with the Bible. It's not cowardly to oppose war. It is not cowardly. It does not mean that you're a pacifist to oppose war. I would gladly defend my home from invasion. I would gladly help liberate people. But that's not what we're doing. It's not what's going to happen if we go to Iran. We're going to kill untold numbers of civilians, and we are going to destroy a large chunk of America's, up and coming young men, psychologically and physically. And even if you don't care about Iranians, even if you don't care about collateral damage and civilian deaths, maybe you care about that. Please do. Please, for whatever your reasoning ends up being, please do not support these wars. I don't even know for sure if what went down with my old friend who got killed and my very good friend who had to watch it happen. I don't know if that had to do with, deployment-induced PTSD, but it's hard to think that the military and war didn't have anything to do with it. And whatever the case is, it still illustrates that the young men who are in the military who end up being veterans, there are reasons that they end up so often on the streets or with messed up lives. And I think we should be looking out for those people. And I think we should not be just hastily sending them off to unjust conflicts that will destroy them. Anyway, I hope this was interesting to some of you guys, or helpful, or thought-provoking, or whatever, because I just feel like I've kind of been here rambling, but I wanted to say some of these things. I'll be back very, very soon with a couple more fun episodes. I think the next one I'll be putting out will either be about Jack Wilson, the hero who put down the mass shooter in Texas, or my my response to the God-Awful Movies review of my Pilgrim's Progress film, which will be a lot of fun, but it's a bit time-consuming because I'm having to break down a lot of media and go through it and take some notes. So anyway, I hope you guys all have a good day and are enjoying your 2020. And just please do not support war, especially not hastily.